is one of the things that I've witnessed over my 12 years or so working with marketing automation is that the real problem with marketing automation is if you don't know how to market, then what are you automating? And so that's the critical and central part of marketing automation is you've got to know how to do marketing before you can do automation of that marketing. And so the tools that we provide at Fix Your Funnel, they're important, they're effective, but they're only effective in the right hands. And so a lot of what we do is talking about marketing so that you know those concepts are going to help you to be effective with the tools that we provide. And today I'm taking a step way deeper than talking about the texting or even marketing automation. We're going straight into marketing in and of itself and the fundamentals of marketing. And I called this part one because I realized there's no way in an hour or two or three I could really cover all the fundamentals of marketing. But what I consider to be the biggest core is what we're actually going to be covering in today's training. And at the core, from my observation experience doing marketing over, like I said, the last dozen or so years, it is this phrase, which you may have heard if you were on one of my later or more recent how to text message effectively in marketing automation. And it is this phrase: I spend my money, time, and effort based on how I perceive the world. Now, this phrase has a lot to it, and I want to have you keep it at the top of your mind so that you can really get a grasp for why this is part of the fundamentals of marketing. We talk about fundamentals. It's the base core concepts that everything else is built upon. So how you use texting, how you use email, how you use landing pages, how you create offers, all of that is based on these fundamentals. And so at its core, understanding that this truth that you and I both spend our money, time, and effort based on how we perceive the world. And that's made up of 6 fundamental areas. It's my focus. Where do I focus? This is where you focus. What are my values? What are the things I consider to be important or critical? What are my beliefs? What are my beliefs about how the world operates, about why things are the way they are? All those beliefs are really critical. What are my assumptions? What are the things that I assume are facts of nature that may or may not be, but I assume them to be? What are my needs? What are the things that I perceive I need to have? And needs are all really subjective. And then finally, what are my aspirations? What are the things that I hope to accomplish, that I hope to become, that I hope to do? What are those things I aspire to that are not currently part of my life? And the perception of my world is really made up of these 6 core concepts. And Dan Kennedy had a huge influence on my early marketing education. And I think one of the big things that I got from him is that marketing is this combination of psychology and math. And the psychology part really has to do with this understanding of who the prospect is of the individual. And that is one of the 3 core fundamentals of marketing. Marketing is the combination of these 3 elements: time, message, and person. So you may have heard it said this way: you have to have the right message at the right time to the right person for marketing to actually do its job, to be effective. And that is true. And the way that I represent that is these 3 circles coming in. And so when the right message is hitting the right person at the right time, then we see marketing work. And one of the things you may notice here is the person, sometimes it's described as the market or the potential audience. Those are maybe more sophisticated terms for the same concept. And so we may have identified the particular person who is the ideal customer for our business, the person that we can actually help effectively. And it's really important to recognize and acknowledge that that's the case, that you cannot effectively help everybody. And some people, when I hear them say that, I say, well, who's your market? And they say, well, everyone. Then I know they haven't really done enough deep thinking about what it is that they actually do, because not everyone is actually your market, ever. And if you believe it is, then we've got work to do, because you've got to figure out who exactly is that person that you can help. And once you've identified who that person is to help, then we think about the message. And what is that message that's going to move that person to take action, to do things differently than they currently do. Because as humans, we're largely creatures of habit, which means we do the same things over and over again based on the information that we currently hold. And that goes back to that initial statement I shared with you, that I make my decisions with my money, my time, and my efforts based on how I perceive the world right now, which is that combination of values, beliefs, assumptions, aspirations, where I focus. So all these different things come into play. And so my message has to be tailored to that person in order to move them from where they are to where we need them to be in order for them to make a buying decision. And frequently, a large component of this is time. Because as humans, we're not static. Although we are repetitious in our nature, and we tend to do things the same way over and over again, and our spending habits tend to be fairly similar and consistent, they do change over time because of where our focus drifts from. Because sometimes our focus is on our health, and so we're really conscientious about our health, and maybe we're better about exercising and food choices. And other times maybe we're not as good because our focus has moved to another area of life. And so as that focus kind of drifts around, the timing of the message is important. And so the timing of our message may not be on point for the focus of that individual. And so because of that, it's not effective. And it doesn't have anything to do with the message. The message is perfect for the person we're targeting, but the timing is just not right. And so these three fundamentals have to be understood if you're to be effective in marketing. Because if you don't know what the levers are that you have to move, then you can't make adjustments, and you start flying erratically and blind as you're trying to figure out, well, what's working? Why is it not working? And then at that point, when you're a little bit desperate or unsure, that's when you're most susceptible to being conned, okay? And believe me, in the world of marketing and sales advice, there are plenty of con men and plenty of people offering bright, shiny objects to distract you and get you to spend money differently. And while I don't fault them because they're, most of them I don't fault because they're actually genuine and honest, they just may not be effective. They're just trying to move you from where you are to where they want you to be. If you want to be able to be effective at marketing, growing a business, you have to understand these concepts. And when you do, then you're not going to be subject to being sold things that really don't make a difference, because you'll understand the fundamentals. And as a result, you're going to know, well, okay, that actually makes sense because that's going to change my message or how that message is delivered or the timing, or, okay, I'm focused on the right person. And so all the con jobs I've ever seen when it comes to small business, people that have taken advantage of folks and ripped them off, and it was clear to me from the beginning it was a ripoff, could have been avoided if they understood just these three core concepts in depth. And so we're going to be going through these. And the real question is, if there's three different circles or orbs that I could be moving around in the marketing world, where do I start? And I think that this sentence right here gives you the clue of where to start. I spend my money, time, and effort based on how I perceive the world. Now, what word is most repeated in this phrase? If you're watching, you want to comment in, that's great. By the way, you should have paper and pencil out, because if you jot some of these things down, they'll serve you later on. But the word that's repeated most in this phrase is I. And so that gives you the clue that the person is where you start. You need to have some idea of who is or where your ideal prospect is. Where are they psychologically? Where are they? Because you have to know where someone is in order to move them to where they need to be. And so we have to start with the person and understanding, who are they? What do they believe? What do they value? What do they focus on? What do they assume? What do they need? What do they aspire to? And all of this makes up what is their frame. So the frame is the way that you view the world. And we're going to get a little more into that. Man, I'm really flying through this, so we're going to be a lot quicker than I thought, I think. But we'll take questions and answers, and we'll go more in depth on some of this stuff. But these questions are really important. If you haven't spent any time asking these questions about your ideal prospect, then it's going to be much more difficult to create a compelling offer. The fundamentals of creating a compelling offer, and that's why this is part of our precursor to the mastermind that we're doing in December on the 9th and 10th, is because you have to have a good feel for what your message should be. And to have a good feel for what your message should be so that we can use effective mechanisms to be able to deliver it, we have to understand these core questions about our prospect. So where are they mentally? Where are they? What do they believe? What do they value? What do they focus on? What do they assume? What do they assume to be facts of life that can't be changed and altered, although they may be? What do they need? What do they aspire to? And then the culmination of all these questions helps you to see what is their frame. How do they view the world? And as a result, decide how they will spend their money, time, and effort. So you've got to get into their head in order for you to be effective at marketing. Because if you don't understand who they are and where they are, everything you're going to do and say is going to fall flat, because you're not in the right place. You're not with them at the beginning. Because you're not at them at the beginning, you can't move them to where they need to be. Okay? So marketing is leading an individual on a journey from where they are to where you need them to be to make the best decision in your and their mutual interest. That is what marketing is. Now, I'm going to say what marketing is a few different times, and I'm going to use different words. But the point is to view it from different angles so that you get a real good idea of the fundamentals of marketing. And so in order for you to take somebody on a journey, you have to have a beginning and an end. You have to know where they are and where they need to go. And so one of the, this has all been kind of theoretical. I want to give you some tactical ways that this is actually done. So if you don't have a very clear picture of where the people begin and where they need to end, you go to the people that are in front of you already. So go to existing customers and ask them questions about, why did you decide to be a customer? If you don't know the answers, that's what you got to go ask the people who know the answers, which are the customers. Now, they may not give you exactly the answers, but they're going to give you a lot of hints that are going to point you to the true answers. Because often people can't articulate why they do the things they do. But when they try to, they're going to give you clues to help you understand mentally what changed for them so that they could become a customer. Because before they became a customer, they were spending their money and their time, their effort in other places. And once they became a customer, something had to shift inside of them that allowed them to make this change. Because if something doesn't shift inside of us, we don't change the way that we act. We don't change the way that we spend and focus and all that. So something had to change. So you have to ask them, what caused you to become a customer? Now, they may bring up a number of different things. They may bring up external circumstances. This is involved in that factor of time. These may be things that you have no control over, but that you can look for delivering your message. This will help you with timing. So was there some external circumstance that caused them to look into your company, right? So there may be an external circumstance. I'll give you an extreme case. My son spilled boiling water on his legs. Immediately, that extreme circumstance forced me to think about, well, who do I want to have take care of him from a medical perspective? And so I had in my mind a trusted resource for medical needs. And so I called that individual and then had them help me line up the experts I would need to take care of my son in an emergency circumstance. So that I would never have been looking for that unless that circumstance had occurred. So circumstance may create the timing that you need for your marketing to be effective. And knowing and understanding what circumstances lead a person to start taking action towards gaining more information so they can become a customer is really critical for you to know. So find out, are there external circumstances that cause the person to want to become a customer? This can give you clues to know where you should put your message and at what time you should put your message to get it in front of the right person at the right time, okay? The other thing that you can do besides asking that is that they're going to give you clues about, well, I heard about you this way. Okay, that's a clue. That's going to give you some clue about how did that information get introduced so that your message started to get to the right place at the right time. So these questions to existing customers are super critical. And if you haven't taken the time to talk to your customers, go do it. And you're going to find that in that process, you're going to learn a lot more about that journey that they took, and that's going to actually lay out the path. There's a story about Microsoft when they built a big campus, and they had a bunch of different buildings everywhere, and they built the buildings, but they did none of the hardscape. Hardscape are the sidewalks. They did no landscaping and no hardscape for the first 6 weeks. And the reason for that was, instead of them trying to guess where they should put all the sidewalks or let somebody decide where to put all the sidewalks that may have been inconvenient, they wanted to let the people that were actually going to be on campus tell them exactly where to lay the sidewalk. And so when you talk to customers who have organically somehow become customers of yours, they're going to tell you the pathways that you need to essentially put down as sidewalks. So these paths become roads, and then these roads can become super highways because they're going to tell you what that needs to be. And that psychological mental journey is going to include some check marks that you're going to have to make sure you hit in your marketing. Those are things they're going to be like, what do they believe? What do they value? What did they focus on? And how did those things change? What did they assume? What assumptions were destroyed as they went through it? So we're going to play a little game here. This is a picture I took on my recent journey to Jerusalem. I went to Cairo and Luxor and some different places like that. I went to Petra, and then I went to Jerusalem. And this, if you're not familiar with it, is Dome of the Rock. So as you look at this picture, you may have focused primarily here. And this is kind of human nature. We tend to focus on shiny, interesting things and people. And so this is what's called the frame. So your frame may have focused primarily on this part, unless you're big into trees and then maybe you looked at the tree. But this is probably what the frame of your focus actually was. You may have looked first at the Dome of the Rock because it's got this big golden roof. It's somewhat famous, and so maybe you'd seen it before, and so immediately go, oh, that's the Dome of the Rock. And so you may have looked there. You may have been drawn to the crowd of people and wondered, well, I wonder what all the people are doing there. Are they going in? Are they taking pictures? What are they doing? Or maybe you were focused on this guy, because if you notice, a lot of the faces are pointing towards that guy. So maybe there's something interesting going on there. Or maybe you caught the side conversation. Maybe that's where you were focusing in this frame. Or maybe you're wondering about this conversation right here in between these two ladies. Or maybe you tend to notice the things that seem out of place and you looked at the trash can. But wherever you were focusing, that is your frame. That frame dictates some sort of mental processes that are going on. And so in marketing, when it comes to the person, once we understand where they are, we have to think about how can we adjust the frame. But I wanted to point out something very interesting in this photo that you may not be aware of. Now you look here and you see a tree coming out of what looks like a stone area. And this stone area is massive. Now you can't see behind me, but behind me, there's even more of it. But the whole area is covered in these flat rocks and these pavers, so to speak. And it looks as though the whole earth, if we were to pull up all the pavers, we'd find dirt underneath all of these pavers. But the truth about this situation, which is very fascinating, is that below these pavers, you'd have to go about 90 feet before you would hit the actual dirt that is underneath these pavers. For 90 feet below those pavers, there are arches upon arches made of stone. Now, this whole complex was created by a guy named Herod the Great. He wasn't great because anybody loved him. He was great because he was a great builder. He built huge and massive things. And so he made this huge area. And the other interesting part about this is not just that this whole massive area is suspended above the actual ground by these huge arches, but this was done about 2,000 years ago. So this is all 2,000 years old. And what's even more interesting is that Dome of the Rock up there, the Muslims believe when they built that Dome of the Rock that they built it over the original threshing floor that David had purchased to be the place where Solomon's temple would be. And so they placed the Dome of the Rock over there because after the Crusades, it was the Muslims that won out over the Crusades and took over the holy city or Jerusalem. And so they built the Dome of the Rock to be over that point, the threshing floor, because they believed that was the place where Solomon's temple used to be. And it had some significance to them because of Abraham, who was a common father to Judaism and Christianity and Islamic religions. But what they don't know is that actually the threshing floor that they built over and that rock that they thought was the place where Abraham offered not Isaac, but Ishmael, which is the one that they believe that Abraham took up to the top of Mount Moriah to offer, is right there. But what they don't know is that the actual place of the threshing floor where the temple was actually 200 feet north of where they built the Dome of the Rock, and that the original place where Abraham from my view, had taken up Isaac to offer him, was actually even further north than that, over what is now, or was to become, a quarry. So all of this may change the way that you view this picture entirely. And as a result of that story, I was able to change how you viewed not only that photo, but also possibly the world. And so that story right there, whether you realize it or not, was called marketing. And marketing is helping a person to enhance their frame, focus, beliefs, and values and aspirations to include your business. Now, in the case of that photo, obviously I wasn't including my business, but I was enhancing the way that you viewed the world based on the information that I gave you. And so it changed the way that you looked at that photo. Instead of imagining just that photo being a flat ground, you could now see all these deep caverns with all these arches, and there must be a series of tunnels under there. You might wonder, well, what went down on in the tunnels? What did they do down there? Or was it like a basement? All these questions could have come to your mind, but I certainly changed the way that you viewed the world if you didn't already know that. And so this whole thing comes back to tell you, always start with the person, because if you don't know where the person is, then you don't know what message to deliver to them. And this is the exact opposite of what most people do in marketing. That's why I call this a fundamental. What most people do in marketing is they start with whatever it is that they have to sell. So they go and say, well, I'm selling this box. What can I tell people about the box that will get them excited? And the last thing that we consider is the person that we're going to show it to. And if you start and flip that around, if you say, okay, who is the person? Now, we may still be taking into consideration what it is, like the box that we have, but if we think more about the person and where they currently are versus how do we tell them about the box, then we're going to come up with a more effective message. And so what I'm going to be telling you may not be what you naturally think or would think to do, but this is the most effective way to do marketing, because it's based on the fundamentals of person, message, and time. So that person, hopefully you guys got enough about the fundamental of the person. Now you need to focus on their psychology and where they are and how they see the world. Because if you do know that, now you can say, okay, now I have some start of what I need to do to change the way that they see the world so that it includes my business. So what message will move the person now that we know where the person is? We obviously need to move them. There's a journey that occurs mentally. Even if they're not aware of it, that journey occurs. So what message will move a person? Well, stories of death, tragedy, nostalgia, and humor move people. Now, the story that I used was one of more of nostalgia and maybe a little tragedy. And very subtle, not too intense. And you can certainly go more intense if you want to get more attention. But what I hope to accomplish, as I was telling you the little story about the picture, was change a little bit about the way you think. Because if you change the way people think, they will become endeared to you. It's part of our human nature that when someone changes the way that we think about the world, we become endeared to them. Now, why would you want to do that? I thought you were trying to sell stuff and make money. So why in the world would you want to have people endeared to you? Well, if you're going to ask people to start making different decisions in their life, people are more likely to make different decisions, to do things differently when they are endeared to the person who's asking them to make the change. What most people do when it comes to message, which is exactly the wrong thing, is they focus on telling the person what to do first instead of worrying about endearing them to you before you give them the instructions on what to do. And so stories of death, tragedy, nostalgia, and humor move people more than anything else. There's a story that I told. I've done lots of testing, by the way. I'm sure you guys have done the same, but I've done lots of testing in marketing. One of the things that I've discovered through that testing was that the most response I ever got to a marketing message, which is silly because I don't use it enough and I really should go back to it, was a video I did talking about a $3 million mistake I made. Now, if I tell you I made a $3 million mistake, which of the three am I hitting on? Am I hitting on death, tragedy, nostalgia, or humor? Okay. If you didn't comment in the box, or if you're just thinking it, you probably thought tragedy, which is exactly right. Because if you made a mistake that cost you $3 million, that would be a tragedy. And so I start out by telling in the video, the audience, that I made a $3 million mistake. And the mistake was we were teaching these 3-hour live seminars in hotel rooms all across the United States. And we would do all this work. We would send millions of emails and faxes, and we would call people. We do everything we could to get them to attend 3-hour training. And then of the people, and we'd have 50 to 100 people that would show up. We'd have 2-3 days a week that we would do these trainings, and each one we have 50 to 100 people that would show up, and we would train them for 3 hours for free. And then at the end, we invite them to become a member and purchase our product. And about 15 to 30% was our range of people that would actually buy. And we never called the people that didn't buy. Never made a single call to anyone who didn't buy. So just think about that. If someone showed up, they left their office, they drove across town dealing with traffic and dumb drivers and all that kind of stuff. They get to a hotel, probably not a place they normally go to, so it's not exactly comfortable. They go in, they sit down with a bunch of people they didn't know, probably their competitors, and they listen to some crazy guy, because that's what we had to speak, teach about some really important stuff for 3 hours. And so they were willing to go through all that effort. So obviously there was a message to market match, because we got them to do all that. They sat down in the room, they listened, and then for some reason they didn't decide to buy. But we don't know what that reason is, and we didn't give them any extra opportunity. We just said, oh, well, they didn't buy, let's move on to the next group. That was a mistake. It was a major mistake. And best that Trent and I could calculate, that cost us $3 million to not make calls. That's why we're so big on making calls to prospects now, why we teach that, and that's why our tools do that, is because we learned through this experience that that was a huge mistake. So if you generate prospects, get them to go through all your marketing, view your assets, whatever they may be, and you're trying to change the way they see the world, and then you give them a buying decision, they don't buy. The worst thing you could possibly do is not call the people that went through all that effort, that acted in every way like a buyer except for spending their money. You should at least give them one phone call and give them an opportunity to express why it is that they didn't make the buying decision. But we didn't do that, and that was our $3 million mistake. Now, see, that's a story of tragedy. But in that story, I have the opportunity to change some people's beliefs. They may believe that, well, it's not worth it to go and make phone calls to people who didn't end up buying, because obviously they're not a match. Well, no, obviously they're not. Obviously, the problem is there's something that keeps them from going. And that's where we learned that there was just one question or one concern that kept most people that didn't buy from buying. They didn't go to competition. They didn't do something else. They ended up doing nothing as a result of us not giving them an invitation by phone, or today we would do maybe a conversation started by text to try and get that situation where they could talk about their concern or their question. And we could have probably helped, a ton more people. And I for sure, at least it cost us $3 million in revenue by not asking that question. See, now that's a story that would change the way people think. And as a result, they'd be endeared to me, but they'd also, through the process, have changed the way they viewed the world. And that opens up and enhances the opportunity for them to take another step in the journey towards becoming a customer. And that leads me to the next fundamental that I need you to understand, which is effective marketing is made up of base hits. So base hits is a baseball term. If you're familiar at all with baseball, you know that a baseball diamond you must go around all the bases on the baseball diamond in order to get to home base, and then you get a point. Okay, and that's the only way you can get a point in baseball. And so if you want to be effective in baseball, what you really want to do is make sure you have base hits. Now, some people swing for the fences and they strike out a lot more than they hit, but occasionally maybe they might be good enough to get some home runs. But if you want to be extra effective in baseball, you focus on base hits. If you want to be extra effective in marketing, you focus on base hits. What are the bases that the prospect must cover in their journey to get to home plate so that they can become a customer and make the buying decision? So what are those steps that they need to take? The better and more familiar you are with the steps that they need to take in that journey, the more effective you'll be in marketing, because instead of going for the home run, which is the purchase or the customer making decision, you can go for each step along that journey so that it's an organic and natural process for the prospect to go through that. And if you do that, you're going to be much more effective and make much more money and convert many more prospects into customers than you will if you only go for home runs. And so this is true not only in marketing. If you take this principle, this fundamental, also is true in business in general. If you go for base hits instead of home runs, you're always going to win more than you're going to lose. And at the end of the day, business really is loss mitigation. How do I mitigate the losses I'm going to have as a result of the risks I have to take as a business owner to grow the business? Because you know less than you do know about running your business at the beginning. And so it's loss mitigation until you figure out how the business works. And then, so if you understand this process of base hits, you're going to orchestrate your business so you're taking a series of base hits instead of always having to hit it out of the park in order to win. But in marketing especially, you need to know what are the bases your prospects need to cover. What do they need to believe? What do they need to value? And what do they need to focus on? So that they can make a buying decision. So if you understand what it is that they need to believe, value, and focus on, then your stories that you tell, the way that you present your message can correlate with that journey that they're going on. And when you ask them to do things, like if you ask them for contact information, you present an offer, that's going to be in alignment with these base hits. You're going to be asking them to step onto first base as your first call to action in your marketing instead of home run. So by example today, there's a lot of different ways to do this. In your marketing, you could go for directly saying, hey, text this keyword to this phone number to get this thing, whatever it may be. That may be what you consider to be first base. In cold marketing, like if I'm just putting an ad, or I should call this advertising, if I'm putting an ad in front of people who have no idea who I am, are not endeared to me, don't know anything about me, then maybe my first base hit is to get them to consume a video that would allow me to have them endeared to me versus giving me contact information. Now, with things like Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, and their ad platforms, this is possible. Now, it wouldn't have been possible in the past. In the past, we would have had to go straight for getting some contact information at least. But today, we can actually add a base hit between getting contact information, and we can actually give information that can change the way they see the world, endear them to us, and most likely, if we want to be effective, do this through a story that in the process may modify some of the ways that they focus on things, the things that they value, and the things that they believe. So stories have the capacity to do that. And if it's a death, tragedy, nostalgia, or humor, then we're actually going to engage them. And through that process, we change the way they see the world, and they're endeared to us. Now we can target those individuals with an ad that actually has a direct call to action. And so that may be the way that we do the base hit concept, is the video, then the direct call to action. From the direct call to action, maybe we deliver more content, ask them to view or consume that in some way, and then so on. But through this process, we've got to understand it's base hits, not home runs. Okay. And then finally, we have the last concept, which is time. Now, this is a picture I just took right before this training because I had another tree in here, and I was like, well, why am I using that tree? I've got a tree in my backyard that would illustrate this perfectly. And this is a fruit tree. You can kind of see in there, if you look in there, those are lemons in there. Some of them are green, some of them are yellow, some of them are yellow-green. But the fruit tree best represents the concept of time when it comes to marketing. The right time is difficult for us to know. And so as a result, we can't just go to the tree once, present our message, harvest the fruit that's ripe at the moment, walk away and never come back. If you do that, you're going to leave much more fruit on the tree than you are going to have in your basket. So one of the concepts you need to understand is the concept of the fruit tree, which is that fruit ripens over time, not all at once. And so if you continue to come back to the tree, then you will harvest more fruit at each time. Now, the fruit represents the person making a decision to take the next step in the journey towards becoming a customer. And when the fruit is ripe, that means we've got the right time, right message to the right person. And so if we have a place where we market to, we advertise, If you just run your advertisement for a short period of time, take whoever responds then, and then quit marketing, quit advertising, then it's like coming to the fruit tree, taking whatever is on the tree, then leaving and never coming back. So that's not what the smart marketer does. The smart marketer understands that time is always changing focus for the right person with the right message. And so if we put the right message in front of the right person, and we continue to do that over time, then eventually we'll find the right time when it actually matters to them. And at that time, we'll get the response. Now, if we paid attention to the interviews and the conversations we had with our buyers, with our customers, we may have learned a little something about timing. So this tree right here doesn't produce fruit all the time. It only produces fruit during its season. And its season, I can know when the season is coming, even not paying attention to the calendar or the temperature outside or anything else, simply by noticing the flowers that show up on the tree. When the flowers show up on the tree, I know that in the near future, it's going to be time to start checking the tree repeatedly. So you can use this concept of time and the fruit tree to help you to think about, when is the right time for me to be checking the tree? And you can know then, when should you be running your marketing so that it has the highest likelihood of setting up with the right timing for the people that are on that. And so that same fundamental can help you then to make good decisions. I mean, if you just did marketing all the time, it would be better than doing the marketing, spotty, just here, there a little, with no intelligence behind it. But if you can learn the timing and seasons of your prospects, then that can help you to be even more effective by being able to consolidate your budget to the right time for the right set of people. But that's this fruit tree. If you always remember that, that'll help you to make sure that you're taking advantage of the time component or the time lever of the fundamentals of marketing. Okay, so we covered quite a bit of ground. I did it pretty compressed. I mean, I think my clock says I'm 35 minutes in. But these fundamentals are at the core of all the other marketing concepts, strategies, and tactics that you'll do. If you understand message, person, and time, and how you can utilize those and how you can find out about them, then you're going to be way more effective in everything else. Now marketing automation has a chance to actually be leveraged because you understand the fundamentals of marketing. So when someone says, hey, we need to put together a follow-up campaign, you're going to go, okay, fruit tree. When someone responds to my base hit, base one, that tells me that they're at least in the flowering phase, if not in the green fruit phase, or maybe even in the yellow fruit phase. And so I need to think about, how can I then nurture that through a follow-up sequence that adds value so that they're endeared to me, because people buy from people they know, like, and trust. We've heard this a million times. But that endearing comes from teaching something new to a person that they didn't know before. And the more interesting it is, and the more it has to do with those hooks that really get people to pay attention, death, tragedy, nostalgia, and humor, then the more effective we'll be at getting our message delivered to them, changing the way that they see the world, and endearing them to us in the process, so that when we ask them to take a base hit, take a next step in the journey, they'll be more inclined to do it. Now, if you've been missing any of those parts, and there's a lot more to it, that's why I said this is part one. If you've been missing any of those parts, then maybe you need to go back and look at your marketing and say, what am I doing differently? Now, if you go look at our website, you may not see the endearing side of it. You may only see the call to action part of it. And the reason why is because I don't send anybody to my website as a step one. If I get anybody to my website, it's always after the fact that I've tried to set up some reason why they should even care what I have to say, which means I've worked on the telling of a story, teaching something new in order for them to be endeared to me, so that I have a reason, they have some sort of reason within their heart for even paying attention to what I ask them to do next. If you're asking people just to do stuff before you've endeared yourself to them, then you don't understand the fundamentals of marketing. As a result, you're fighting a much more difficult battle than you need to. Okay, so Q&A time. Let's see, I only see a aloha, which is nice. Thanks, Ed. Are there any questions you guys have about the topics that we've been discussing? I don't even know if there were other questions. I missed them. Okay, well, I'll stick around for about 10 seconds because I got lots to do as well. And if there's no questions, then I will just move on. Okay. So the point of the Q&A was not for you to ask questions about what I taught, but maybe about how you can apply it into your business. Because what I just taught was all of the theoretical, all of the foundational, the psychological underpinnings of marketing. And so none of this is directly applicable until you start doing some translation of the concept to the the road. Where the rubber hits the road is the important part. So learning this can help you start looking at things differently. But in order for you to be able to translate it through, you may need to talk to somebody. And that's part of why we're doing this now instead of wasting an hour at the mastermind to go over this concept, because I need this to marinate in you for a while. So if you are already registered to attend the mastermind, or you're thinking about it even vaguely, or if you're just doing business, let these concepts marinate on you a little bit. If you want to listen to it a second time, because you probably listen to it if you've watched it once, but if you listen to it and just let this marinate on you, what's going to happen is that your brain's going to start seeing some things that it needs to see that it didn't see before. And so you'll start to notice where you haven't endeared people to you first, where you've been so focused on getting them to buy that you haven't gotten them to even understand why they should care or pay attention to what you have to say. And I see this mistake happen over and over again, where folks are too concerned about, and sometimes it can come out of our sense of desperation. We need a sale. I need to make an extra 1,000 this month. I need to do this. I need to do that. But unfortunately, the market doesn't care about what you need. And so you've got to come to the market with value. And when you change the way people see the world, believe it or not, that's the most valuable thing that you can do for a person, is change the way they see the world, especially if you change it for the better. If you enhance their view and understanding of the way the world works, then that creates a connection with that person that can't be formed in any other way. So it's really critical you start thinking about, how can I start enhancing the value? Now, some people have businesses where they may think it's really tough. Like I see Chad's name in here. I know Chad's business, at least it was last time I talked to him, was house cleaning. And so you may think, well, house cleaning is such a mundane thing. I mean, it's something that needs to be done, but is there anything really fascinating I can teach about house cleaning that would then make a person want to do business with me? And that's the question to ask. That's the question to ask. What could be interesting about my topic? So interesting. And I gave you 4 starting points, so that should help, right? So we have death, tragedy, nostalgia, and humor. I guarantee there's something connected to one of those 4 topics in every single one of your businesses. Every single one of them has one of these topics, a story that's around it. Now we take the story and you jot down kind of the general flow of that story. And then you ask yourself, okay, is that an interesting story? That's the first part. It has to be interesting because nobody likes boring. So it's got to be somewhat interesting. Now, once you've got the interesting portion down, now the question is, what beliefs, what values, what focus, what aspirations, I'll just cheat. So, what assumptions, what needs, what part of that person that needs to be a little bit different than maybe where I know they're starting from, can I incorporate into the story? How can I help change somebody's assumptions about the way the world works? A good example of this is the story told by Steve Covey. Now, this story from Steve Covey comes from his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the concept he's trying to teach in it, I'll reveal after, but the story goes like this. He says, I was once on a subway train in, let's say it's New York City. And this father comes in with 2 children, and the children are rowdy. They're running all over. They're knocking people's newspapers out of their hands. They're just being a huge disruption to everybody on the metro. And so finally, it bugs Steve enough that he gets up and goes over to the man and says, Sir, your children are being a real nuisance. Can you please take care of them? And the man, kind of startled out of his daze, looks up at him and says, oh, I'm sorry. Their mother just passed away. And I guess I didn't notice that they were making a mess everywhere. Like that, Steve's perspective, his paradigm shifted. And then instead of these kids being a nuisance, he wanted to help the father. So instead of being annoyed at the father, suddenly he became interested in helping the father. That story is extremely powerful because it teaches the concept of the paradigm shift, that one thing can change the way that you view everything. And so that's the story that you're looking for. You're looking for the story, and you'll notice that story wasn't long. I think it may have been a minute, but the story is powerful. Those are the stories that you want to look for to be effective in your marketing. The story that changes the way that people see the world. And those stories are sitting all around you. You may have become too acquainted with them, too comfortable with them. But like my $3 million mistake story, you have stories that are all around you that you've become accustomed to that would change the way people see the world. And so from my perspective, what you want to do to really take advantage of these fundamentals of marketing, right, of time, message, and person, is you want to be thinking about what story is going to change the way that somebody focuses, what they value, what they need, what they believe, what they aspire to, the assumptions that they make, so that it better prepares them to make the buying decision that you ultimately will be asking them to make. And all of your marketing, all of the emails that you write, all the text messages that you send, all the blog posts that you put up, all the videos that you produce are all centered around this concept of how do I endear them to me, and then so that when I ask them to take a next step, they're going to want to do it. How do I change it the way they see the world so that when I ask them to take a next step, it will make sense to them to make that step? How do I change the way that they see the world so that when I ask them to make a buying decision, they're in the best place possible to make the buying decision? So that there won't be buyer's remorse, there won't be regret, but they'll be in a place where they're so excited about the decision that they made that they'll actually blab about it. They'll brag about it. They'll tell their friends. They'll tell other people. If someone brings up the topic that you do, immediately you'll come to mind and they'll be telling them about you. All that comes from this foundation of understanding that I spend money, time, and effort based on how I perceive the world. And as you understand how you can shift the way that somebody sees the world, their frame, then you're going to be equipped to start making your marketing more effective. And now when we add automation to it, instead of just sending out nonsense, because too often that's what I see is a lot of nonsense coming through. People are desperate to send another email. They're desperate to send another blast. They're desperate to get another sale, that they send out garbage trying to get me to change the way that I act and behave, but they haven't bothered to change the way I see the world. And so focus more on that. And as you do, I tell you, your marketing is to be more effective. When you got to write a new email, when you got to sell a new thing, you're not going to be going, well, where do I start? You're going to say, okay, where are they? Where's the person that I'm trying to communicate with? And where do I need them to go? What story can I tell that comes out of death, nostalgia, tragedy, and humor that could endear them to me, teach them something new, change the way they see the world, and prepare them so that when I ask them to do the next step, they'll be happy to do it. And so that is the whole point of marketing. Those are the fundamentals of marketing. You get this stuff down, I tell you, the world will change for you. Because you don't have to work nearly as hard when you're doing the right things. See, when I see the guy that has to send out the email every day asking me to buy something, I know that they don't understand the fundamentals of marketing. Now, that's not to say you can't send an email out every day, but if you do it, you're going to do it the right way, because you're actually going to understand what is the journey I'm trying to take the person on. Who is it that I'm trying to take on the journey? What is it that I need them to believe? What is it I need them to value? What is it I need them to focus on? What is it that I need them to aspire to? What is it that I need them to break out of in terms of an assumption so that they see things differently? And then now I just start thinking about what are the stories that I can tell? Where has death, tragedy, nostalgia, and humor struck me? And then now I've got a place to start bringing it to them. So hopefully this will help you, and I expect it should, in your blog posts, your emails, your text, your videos, your Facebook ads, your webinars, your presentations, whatever it may be. So, okay, I'm done. There's no more questions coming in. In fact, we had no questions whatsoever. I don't know if I'm just that good, or if I'm just giving you guys so much to think about, or if I'm so out there you guys can't follow what I'm saying. But hopefully it's not the latter. But if there's no more questions, I really feel like that sums up for us the fundamentals of marketing. And next Tuesday is when I'm planning to give the next class. That one is going to be more about a process for evaluating your business. How do I decide what I should be focusing on? How do I decide, or no, it's not even a decision really, it's a revelation. How do I get the business to reveal to me what is it that I need to be focusing on most? Because your business actually has the capacity to reveal to you what it needs most. And if you know that, then you won't waste your time. Because see, what happens is, and I guess right now I'm selling you on why you should attend Tuesday's class, whether you care about coming to the mastermind or coming or you're not even thinking about it. But what happens that I see all too frequently is people spend an enormous amount of time, money, and effort to try and fix a problem that isn't the problem. And then when they don't see any change in results, they feel frustrated, they maybe feel dejected, maybe desperation starts to set in because they got this feeling of not having control, of not having hope, because they don't know what to do because what they did didn't produce the result they expected. And the problem usually is that the problem that they fixed wasn't actually the problem. And so maybe they were sold on the problem that they've tried to fix. Maybe they just don't have enough understanding about how the business operates and how it communicates to get the message that the business was trying to deliver. Maybe they just don't know what they had to do because the last thing that they did that actually produced results, they tried to replicate that again. And unfortunately, rarely is that the case. And so they feel a little bit lost. And so we're going to share with you on Tuesday a methodology for actually allowing the business to communicate to you where to start looking for the core problem that's limiting the business from taking the next step in growth. And then how do we find out if the problem that we think we've identified actually is the problem? Then how do we properly identify a solution? Because people screw up here as well. They don't pick the right solution because they form the solution the wrong way. And so we're going to teach you about how to form the solution the right way, and then how to come up with a game plan on how to implement it, and then how to make sure that you stay focused on that and see it to its end instead of getting distracted by another bright, shiny object or somebody else that has a pretty compelling sales message or whatever the case may be. And so that will be next Tuesday. I think we're going to do that one at 11 a.m. because 10 a.m. I forgot is when we have the reason I forgot is because we changed from, Phoenix stays at the same time, but we switch between our staff being on Pacific time and Mountain time, and I'm in Tucson, so my time stays the same. So in the past, if I did 10 a.m., it would have been safe because my morning call with all the team happens at 9 a.m. And now it's happening at 10 a.m. because I flipped over to Mountain time. And so I accidentally set this one for 10 a.m. and I missed that call. So I'll do it at 11 a.m. Mountain time. So that will be the time that we will do the next training on Tuesday. So, and like I said, it's going to be on how to identify where the opportunity for growth in your business is, how to confirm that you've got the right problem before you start trying to solve it, how to orchestrate or design a solution the right way, because most people do it the wrong way, unfortunately. It's not because they're dumb, they just haven't been taught. And so if you haven't been taught, the natural man, the way that we naturally go with human nature is to go the wrong direction, unfortunately. So we'll teach you the right way to create the solution, and then talk about how you orchestrate a plan to implement the solution and how you can use this process to give you confidence to stay focused on implementing the solution. All right. Well, that was a lot, but we're just at under an hour, so I'll wrap it up here. Again, if there's any questions, I'm going to give 10 more seconds, and hopefully I won't think of something more so I don't go on for longer. But I'll give it 10 more seconds. Any questions?